not to pop the balloon that's been bursting since West Virginia's big victory over NC State, but that win may not exactly mean everything some of you think it means. This is a West Virginia football edition of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I am your host, Mike Asti, coming at you from our Pittsburgh Sports Live studios up above Market Square here in downtown Pittsburgh. And West Virginia got a victory. They got back on the winning streak. WVU now 2-1 on the year with a victory over NC State, a team they didn't actually even get to play last year due to a hurricane. So a big win as that out-of-conference opponent that West Virginia was able to now chalk up in the W column. But mind you, this is coming a week after WVU lost to Missouri, a Missouri team that had Kelly Bryant at quarterback, a national championship quarterback, but also a guy who lost his job to another national championship quarterback at Clemson. And besides him is the only star on Missouri, and that's a Missouri team that lost to Wyoming. Yes, Wyoming, the week before. So they're not exactly impressing anybody despite coming out of the SEC and being an out-of-conference game. So this is back-to-back out-of-conference games for WVU, at least major Power 5 out-of-conference games. Of course, getting the win over JMU to start the year. But as I detailed after that game, that didn't impress anybody. Week 1 actually exposed WVU's weaknesses. That's an episode of Mic Drop that you can find on Pittsburgh Sports Live on this channel in the Mic Drop section, as well as on WVSportsNow.com. On WVSportsNow.com underneath shows and then the Mic Drop section. That victory that was a victory, but 20-13 over JMU. Of all teams, despite being number 2 in their level, they're still a lower level than WVU. And even with all the WVU's doing rebuilding-wise and all the stars being gone and graduated and a new coach and a new era, you still should have a better time against JMU. You shouldn't be trailing really at any point in that game, and they were. So you leave week 1 not impressed. It exposed the weaknesses. And then week 2, you're really almost 0-2. JMU almost could be treated as a loss. And then week 2, you do lose. And in shellac fashion, as Missouri just beats West Virginia down, where many almost jumped off the bandwagon and quit on the year. I didn't do that, of course, because here, my other show on WVSportsNow.com, I made it clear, and this is how I previewed the season, but I wanted to make it clear to everybody kind of where I stood. Okay? I'm a WVU alum. I've been in Pittsburgh media for a while, but I haven't covered West Virginia in a while. And while WV Sports Now is a part now of the Pittsburgh Sports Now empire and a part of the Now family, and that's, of course, part of me running Pittsburgh Sports Now, Pittsburgh Sports Live, and what I contribute in terms of covering the Steelers, etc., it was going to include some WVU shows. I had to do it to help them out at WVSportsNow.com as they join us. But for those who followed WV Nation and weren't a part of the Now family fandom and maybe didn't know me, I wanted to let you know where I stood. And that show said it all. I told WVU fans to temper their expectations, to temper the expectations around Neil Brown, because in the offseason after he got hired, through training camp, through every press conference that he had, he said all the right things. He did all the right things. Coach Nalen was praising him. Everybody in media, even rival fans and media, were all praising him. I mean, we got a lot of Pitt fan subscribers on this channel. A lot of Pitt fans were tweeting me saying, that's the right guy for you guys. I know I went back and forth with somebody recently about maybe, should have kept Holgorsen. But once Holgorsen's situation was done and gone, and that was going to be the case for anybody in the know, Neil Brown was the right guy. Everybody thought it was a job that made sense for his career projection, and he was the right guy for the job. I believe that too. But I made it clear to give him some time. You can't really judge him off this year because you gave Holgorsen a few years, and yes, he guided you through the Big 12 and won you the Orange Bowl early on, and then we saw the upsets, big wins, but also upsets kind of tailing off for average seasons recently. But any college coach, I said this about Rich Rod when he went to Michigan, as tumultuous as that was. And I was a student then, so you know my thoughts at that time. I wasn't covering. I was a fan then. But you still got to give a guy a few years to get his recruits in there, to get time in there, to really put a stamp on the program, especially when you're going through a rebuild. He didn't get to inherit a Will Greer. He didn't get to bring in a grad student who's a veteran who comes in. Greer was a veteran, played at Florida a little bit despite eventually being suspended off that team. But Austin Kendall doesn't have that experience. Came from Oklahoma, but doesn't have the experience that Greer did, doesn't have the hype around him that Greer did, wasn't a Heisman candidate coming in like Greer was. And then all the myriad of weapons around Greer. That's what Holgorsen had the last 2 years. And yes, he recruited guys prior, Geno Smith, etc. But there was tons of talent there. This is not a talented WVU team. This is a team that Neil Brown has that has an inexperienced quarterback, that has inexperienced weapons around him at receiver and running back. Has a defense that Askew Henry's gone. Was with the Steelers in the offseason in camp. I mean, a lot was off the team. The stars are gone. Sills is gone. Miles Sanders is gone. Saw him on Sunday Night Football recently. So that meant give him some time. You can't say that just because this year might be a 4 or 5 or 6 loss season, like the last couple of years, the sky is falling. You got to give him some time. That was a veteran Holgorsen. This is a rookie coach in Neil Brown in terms of his era at WVU. So I believe all of that. But after the victory over North Carolina State, many of you who even agreed with me then totally flipped and went buck wild again. No pun intended for the former MTV reality show set in West Virginia. You know, somebody I knew who actually was on that show. But anyway, where it was tons of hype. Oh, that was a big win. Finally got a big win. Forget the Missouri game. This is the real West Virginia Mountaineers. I even heard that from some fellow members of media. Some colleagues I know down there in West Virginia because I contribute to what they do down there with Metro News, etc. They were going crazy. And maybe they're a little bit more fans as I try to do this fairly because I'm out of market. But and I know what they have to do, being there. But, yeah, it was a big win, but let's not go crazy. Because you still got to remember the Missouri game. You still got to remember the JMU game. You still got to remember what this team lost and where they are coming into the year. And I'm going to say it's a big win. You can't deny it. But it's not a win that it's not like beating Oklahoma or any of those conference victories. It's not a win that you're really going to hang your hat on at the end of the year. North Carolina State's not that good. Missouri's not that good either, and you lost. It's a situation that you're still looking at an average season. You're still looking at 7-5 slapping you right in the face. You're hoping to be in a bowl game, but you're not looking at a great bowl game. You're hoping to win that bowl game, but you haven't recently, so that's no guarantee. You're looking at an average season still. Not to be the bearer of bad news, but that's keeping it real. Because you got Kansas coming up, and Kansas, they got a win under their belt with Les Miles. Les Miles, a former national champion level coach at LSU, sat out a couple years, now back at Kansas. It's a weird program for him to be at, leaving the SEC to go to the Big 12. But like Neil Brown, you got to give him time to bring in his recruits, and you got to give him more of a year than a year. I would say that about any head coach. It's his first year at Kansas. But Kansas is not even close to WVU in terms of level of football program the last 10, 20, even historically. That's a basketball school, of course. West Virginia and Kansas are competing on the hardwood for the Big 12 championship every year, and Kansas winning it. They're the better basketball program recently and historically, but not football. And Kansas, went through Charlie Weiss, etc. They're basically an average team at best. It's been bad years for Kansas. They've been the basement of the Big 12. But that's the Kansas team that now 2-1, just like West Virginia. They hadn't played anybody for those victories either, so that their victories aren't impressive. But it's a Kansas team that is going to be better just by being coached by Les Miles. They're going to be competitive. And I'm not expecting Kansas to win by any means, and West Virginia will probably win. But even when they get that win, there's no reason for the parade just yet, because once you get into the heartbeat of the schedule, when you get closer to playing Texas, which isn't far away, they're a top 15 team now. Oklahoma, who always beat West Virginia even with talent. Cannot imagine this year. Oklahoma State, who they want to get revenge from last year, and that should have been a victory. That really is what ruined the year. But there's talent always there. Iowa State, etc., always gives you problems. TCU as well. There's going to be wins on that schedule. But there's also going to be tough games and games that you didn't think would be tough that end up being tough. There might be another Missouri game out there. Because this is a team that with Austin Kendall and, against NC State, You saw a solid game. You saw a better game than he had the previous 2 weeks. 27 of 40 is still a lot of pass attempts for him. You'd like to get that down. 272, 3 TDs and 1 pick. So as I said before, and this is, I think, a key that changed that led to that victory. I said it in the last 2 shows. I said it here in terms of what week 1 exposed, and what week 1 really exposed was, yeah, you won, but you had no running game. The leading rusher in the game had 20 yards on the ground, and then you did nothing against Missouri. You're getting into negative numbers with some of those backs. You had a running back by committee group, but nobody really to solidify the rock, and even though you spread it out, nobody went anywhere in weeks 1 or 2. So that is what told you what was wrong with WVU in terms of their offense. Anybody could know it, but that was an obvious thing that smacked you right in the face again. The defense, especially the secondary, losing a guy like Askew Henry, etc., that was a problem. Teams able to pass over them. They also couldn't handle a spread quarterback. They couldn't handle a quarterback that has the arm strength but also can run around. They couldn't handle what happened at Missouri. That was a problem there. And maybe some thought would have been a problem at NC State that didn't end up being a problem. So secondary and running game, big issues. And they were able to fix a little bit of it against NC State. So part of what led to the victory, not only did Austin Kendall throw for the yards, but you're looking at the running game. Kennedy McCoy, 10 for 66, two touchdowns. Letty Brown, 7 for 35 and a touchdown. He's averaging 5 per, even though 35 on the ground only. Austin Kendall even ran 4 for 33, average of 8.2, so that's showing some running ability that they haven't had in a while for a quarterback. Certainly didn't have with Will Grier. Sean Ryan, 1 for 24. Alex Skinfield, 4 for 10. Sam James, 1 for 7. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different backs, and that includes the quarterback, that got a carry on the ground, a legit carry. They all went in positive directions, which you can't say from Missouri. And Kenny McCoy appears to be that number 1 back. He appears to be the guy that you're looking for if you need to rely on somebody. Him and Brown probably. You don't want Kendall to run too much as a quarterback, obviously. That's not his game. This is not a spread offense like you remember from Rich Rod. But Candy McCoy kind of became that guy, averaging 6.6 per, 2 touchdowns, 2 dubs, 3 overall touchdowns on the ground in addition to the 3 in the air, and 44 points on the board. So the offense came alive. The defense still allowed 27, which is a bit more. The defense didn't impress as much as that running game finally did to get going, which was a big deal. Win, lose, or draw, you got to have the running game moving. They needed a versatile offense that was able to be balanced. They weren't balanced in weeks 1 or 2, and they got balanced against NC State. That was a big deal that led to the win. But this is still an average team. This is still a 7-5 team that's looking at 7-5, a team that probably won't be ranked throughout this year, a team that you need to have confidence and some patience in Neil Brown because it is his first year, and it might be record-wise like Holgerson's last 2 years. But they had talented Heisman candidates, NFL players, and there was a veteran team that underachieved because they lost to Oklahoma State and Iowa State in those upset games. That, yeah, you're going to go ahead and lose to Oklahoma, but when you beat Texas, you certainly should beat a 5-loss Oklahoma State team. That's really what ruined your year. But that might be a similar year you have this year with Neil Brown, but it's not room for as much criticism. It's not as big of a problem because it's his first year in, and there's a lot less talent there, to be fair. So I believe in Neil Brown. I do. I think he's the right guy. I mean, fans, media, rivals, everybody believed in him coming into the year, and it added to a lot of hype. It did. As much as I made it clear even before the season, WVU fans need to temper expectations. And that was about Neil Brown, and that was about the first year, and that was about the Neil Brown era, which I believe will be successful, but give it time. And the NC State game, while it's a big win, and while the running game was there, and they might have found their guy, and the defense was better, but the defense wasn't great and had holes still. It showed a lot about it did, and this is where fans sometimes go, it did show a lot about the moxie of the team, to use a nice word there, and about how they believe in Neil Brown and are learning under Neil Brown, and the maturation process of player and coach is there based on responding, and this is what he said, responding after the Missouri beatdown and getting embarrassed by Missouri, an average Missouri team out of conference, a game you feel like you should win or at least compete in. After that game, to turn it around and a week later end up with a pretty significant out-of-conference victory over NC State. A 17-point win over NC State? Yeah. That's a big deal. But, however, you still got to calm it down in terms of how big of a deal. It's good that they had that confidence in Neil Brown and believed in him, but there's still tempering of expectations that are needed, and I wouldn't expect domination throughout the rest of the season. Whatever happens against Kansas is not indicative of the rest of the year because Kansas is an average program as well. And I would still be heavily concerned in the games against Texas, against Oklahoma, etc. in conference. This is still a 7-5 team. We're screaming at 7-5 no matter what just happened at NC State. So this isn't going to be an in-depth one. There's not going to be tons of analysis here on this one. There's past two shows I did that for you, especially exposed them back in week one and then tempered the expectations before, giving concrete reasons why each of those shows. I didn't do a show last week going into the NC State game because of all the things going on in my personal life, my grandmother passing away and dealing with all of that. And didn't get to do one up until now this week, but I wanted to get one out there in terms of before this next game because we're getting into conference play for West Virginia, and you're coming off a victory. I mean, NC State's a win. It's a decent win. You're coming off a win. But the whole conversation of this is the real West Virginia and the Missouri game was a fake imposter and we're just kind of let that be a mulligan as they get ready, I don't buy that yet. I don't want to be negative, but I don't buy that yet. I think Missouri was part of who West Virginia is this year. The talent is just not there right now, and the experience is there. Whereas the NC State game, maybe that was playing over their heads. I mean, they played well. The winning game is why that turned around. They were able to be balanced finally. But I wouldn't expect that much more. You expect to be Kansas, but I wouldn't expect that much more as we go. And buying too much into the hype off of that one out-of-conference win after, don't forget what just happened the week earlier. So West Virginia now 2-1. We'll see what happens. It's going to be one of those roller coaster years, I'd imagine. We probably don't know who the real West Virginia is. The only thing I will say from the NC State game, and I was concerned after Missouri and even after JMU, is what we learned against North Carolina State there. It's on WVSportsNow.com. As they went into depth of this, I like to touch on the shows and be able to promote their articles and what they're discussing throughout the week. I hit it at the end. And I give you an extra bump of promotion here throughout the Now Network and here on my outlet of Pittsburgh Sports Live. So I'm going to do WV shows on this channel. Might as well give them that promotion and do it big based on what they're writing. Whether I agree or not, and if I don't agree, I'm going to say I don't agree. But here they hit it in terms of what we learned, and you did learn the players are playing for Neil Brown still. That's good, and you learn there's a running game to be had. But there's still things need to be improved on, the defense especially, the secondary especially still. But I'm still believing this team is a question mark going forward. I still believe that Missouri game was still indicative of what this team could be, and that's negative in the negative direction, and that's a concern. And I don't believe too much of the hype from NC State, even though it is a big win. So there's still a lot left to be desired and a lot left to see. They get into conference play. We'll see from there. It's not a big elite opponent just yet, so we'll see if they can rack up some wins because that is necessary right now to get that respectable record in this first season, which, again, you got to temper expectations and let it play out this first year under Neil Brown. But I want to make sure to remind all you guys, whether you're watching as West Virginia fans on WVSportsNow.com, where this show does also reside, but also if you're just a subscriber to our channel or you want to add it on or you're just seeing it on YouTube throughout the masses out there, to hit up the entire family of networks throughout the Now family, Pittsburgh Sports Now, the mothership, I won't say who the flagship of who they cover there based on what this show's about, but Pittsburgh Sports Now is the mothership, and it's a friendly rivalry. But even if it isn't, this WVE Sports Now wouldn't be here without that in terms of absorbing the blog and making it into this credentialed outlet. So there's still got to be a level of respect there. But the mothership, Pittsburgh Sports Now, as well as Pittsburgh Hockey Now, getting towards Penguin season, already getting exhibition games, training camp, etc. Pittsburgh Soccer Now, and SteelersNow.com, as I'm part of SteelersNow.com, heavily involved there in terms of covering that Steelers season, in-game coverage, credentialed outlet, news, notes, analysis. Roller coaster ride for the Steelers. I got shows there. A lot of the mic drop shows are Steelers centric. They're going to be Pirates. There's going to be the Penguins as well, but a lot of them are Steelers centric. So go there to the channel and click on the subscribe button to make sure it's easier for us to get this content to you, because in addition to all those sites, there's also pghsportslive.com where these shows live. There's the Pittsburgh Sports Live Facebook where you want to go and see all these videos there as well. Like that page to help us out there. And follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter at PGH Sports Live on Twitter, and here at WV Sports Now. WV Sports Now. For Skyler's site that's just kicking ass and taking names, to say the least. So we're proud of them, and they're going to keep it up. Will West Virginia keep it up will be the question. But they get a big win, so they're riding high, but we'll see now getting into conference play. I'm just still kind of tempering things, and a lot too much in terms of the jubilation after one big win. I mean, they got the running game moving. That was a key to get that victory. But Missouri is still lingering out there. I'm not going to forget what happened in that Missouri game. And this West Virginia team is still screaming as an average team, a 7-5 team probably at best. We'll see as they get towards conference play. But they just calm down just a bit. Simmer down now for the old SNL skit. Simmer down now. But that's going to do it for this one. Follow me on Twitter at MikeAsti11. Follow me on Twitter at MikeAsti11. We can discuss there intelligently, or if you want to run amok and troll, then I'll probably ignore you. But go ahead there. Slide in my DMs if you want in terms of talking sports. That's all that'll happen there. But, we can talk. Tweet me there if you want. Follow at your own risk, though, because I'm going to keep it real there just like I do on these programs. And West Virginia, it just really, we'll see. I mean, that's really what it is for West Virginia. We'll see. I can promote the college radio station that I worked at WVU while I'm here. So U92 FM, WVU FM in Morgantown. 91.7 if you're there, around the radius, which I believe goes all the way to Washington, PA. Or listening to them online, following at U92. I think there's an underscore FM on Twitter, and you'll find all of the rest of that there. And to steal the closing from one of my best friends that runs that little thing and I work with in college, I'll do it this way because I'm talking WVU, because it's WVU football in terms of this version of the show, of Mic Drop, and because I just promoted the college radio station U92. Why not? I'm your host, Mike Asti. This has been a WVU football edition of Mic Drop on Pittsburgh Sports Live and WVSportsNow.com. And folks, we'll meet again.